Thank you for joining us here on the Citizens Chat Show, streaming on YouTube at Civic Space TV every Friday at 2 p.m. I'm your host, Judith Atim, and welcome to the show. It has been quite a week, both here in Uganda and further afield. Well, here at home, on Wednesday, it was quite a beehive of activity, in particular in our parliament, as legislators gathered to actually look at the rationalization of agencies, and of course a number of agencies have been rationalized as we speak. Well, we'll start off with, of course, events here at home before we cross to see what happened in the US. Well, on Wednesday, 6th of November, Parliament eventually passed into law the National Coffee Amendment Bill 2024, and subsequently the House approved that UCDA should be dissolved and its functions taken over by the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries. Of course, UCDA was not the only agency that was rationalized. There were other agencies as well, including the Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority, the Privatization Unit, and the Non-Performing Assets Recovery Trust, which were dissolved and taken back to the Ministry of Finance. Also, the Uganda National Roads Authority and the Uganda Road Fund were dissolved, and their functions as well returned to the Ministry of Works and Transport. But what made the rationalization of UCDA quite an interesting one was, of course, the conversations that had actually taken place prior, and also how heated the issue was in Parliament that led to actually the exchange of blows and subsequent suspension of about 12 members of Parliament. Very interesting developments, of course, sad at the same time and embarrassing to a degree. Let me just get your thoughts. My panelists, Dr. Sarah Bireete, Mr. Joseph Othieno, and Major Awich Pollar. Your thoughts quickly about the events that transpired in Parliament on Wednesday. We'll start with you, Sarah.
I thought you'd start with Afande. They're the ones who evaded the sanctity of Parliament. But let me start. So the events first running through is, I would like to start with the NRM caucus meeting in Chisozi, where the president took NRM MPs for a farm tour and just warned them that he won't allow anybody to play around with him. He is the most, like the #1 citizen, and he's accountable to Ugandans. And literally there was no meeting, just a few people spoke, and the purpose of the caucus was just to intimidate the MPs. The MPs after the caucus spoke, and there's even a long dossier written by the MP for Kaberuka, Honorable James Kaberuka, that is doing rounds on social media about the coffee bill. But the president, after the NRM caucus, on 2 occasions, appeared on TV calling people opposed to the rationalization of UCDA criminals and terrorists. He had used the same remark when he was talking to the chair of the Buganda caucus, Honorable Mwanga Chuvumbi, saying opposing UCDA rationalization is terrorism. So one can't help wonder about the interest of President Museveni in coffee. We saw the same energy when he was advocating for Bireete to take over the monopoly of Screen 18 seeds, which is the best quality of coffee beans that we produce. An initiative that was failed by the MPs, and maybe that's why he engaged higher gears this time, that he was taking the bill. So what is in this bill, briefly, maybe for the viewers to understand why the fight? There is a monopoly created under the export chain system, and that is hidden under clause 5 in the object of the bill, is that the government must or should create an export chain system for coffee, and I'll get to the specific wording for coffee, among other things, and this is now the duty of the ministry. When you seek deeper into the meaning of this clause, it means that the government will take over the marketing of coffee, the processing, gazetting, appointing marketing agents for coffee, and export. And export for coffee. It is similar to the Nairobi Coffee Exchange that is created. It's called the coffee auction system. So this system means that government will create or find buyers from all over the world to buy coffee through one point of sale. Nairobi has a similar arrangement under the Nairobi Coffee Exchange. This Nairobi Coffee Exchange manages the auction of all coffee produced in Kenya. It is managed by the country's Exchange Management Committee and regulated by the Kenyan Agriculture, Food and Fisheries Authority. Also, government plans to create a similar authority. At that National Coffee Exchange, auctions are held every Tuesday unless there is an insufficient volume of coffee to justify doing so. This exchange is the sole auctioneer of all coffee. How does it do its work? After harvesting coffee beans, farmers take them to a local washing and pulping station known as a factory, and from there it is processed, dried and graded. And the coffee exchange appoints agents. The farmer stops at harvesting beans and delivering them to the factory. From there, what happens is a monopoly of government. Appointing agents, appointing a day for auction, appointing who buys coffee and who takes it out of Uganda. So this process will shortchange farmers. Kenyan farmers do not earn as much money as Ugandans, and that's why Kenya is not heard of in the coffee growers. It's not a big name in the coffee growers section, but also it does not provide enough income or resources to the owners of coffee. Coffee belongs to citizens. They plant it on their own land. Coffee does not belong to government. It's not like minerals, where the government decreed in our laws that any land below 6 feet, you don't own it. If minerals are discovered on your land, you vacate. That land belongs to government. You have to just discuss compensation. But unlike that, coffee is planted on the land that is owned by Ugandans. So this bill that was passed has this coffee auction chain or system, which is a reintroduction of a penalty kind of thing, and it will create monopoly for government to choose who engages or buys coffee and exports coffee the same way it is done in Kenya. Our parliament did not discuss this clause. First, we woke up. I passed at around parliament yesterday at around 7 a.m. It was surrounded by SFC. These are forces, I don't know whether their mandates changed, but ordinarily these are forces that are supposed to guard the president and his family members and maybe a selected few VIPs on the choice of the president. They surrounded parliament. Parliament is supposed to be guarded by police. It is a temple for democracy. It is the area that, you know, implements the wishes, values, and aspirations of the people on a daily basis, and the parliament belongs to the people. The MPs that we had in a meeting said that SFC soldiers were everywhere, including washrooms, and to make sure that there are no whispers to the contrary position as that the wish of the president. When the plenary started, Honorable Zake is then boxed by Honorable Call after Call had occupied his seat intentionally. Honorable Call, as much as he's a member of the opposition, he belongs to a group of parliament known as C40. C40 are the blue-eyed boys and girls of the speaker. They have their own group, they have their own code. C40, I don't know what C means. And the Honorable Call belongs to that group. So the decision or the act by Honorable Call to come and occupy a seat which was already occupied by a honorable colleague could have been a plan to upset the opposition after they had voiced out their rejection of the bill. And the events that followed, the temporary detention of journalists. Journalists were got that were covering Parliament, accredited to cover the proceedings of Parliament, were told to go to the basement in a conference hall, and their door was guarded by 2 SFC. Nobody could move, nobody could do anything. That is temporary detention. Because detention is any loss of liberty. So the Parliament detained journalists. That is a second violation. The third violation that happened was the strangers that came into the chambers after the scuffle and after the switching off of power, which I describe as darkness at noon, and most of us read darkness at noon as we were, studying in secondary. So Parliament created darkness at noon, maybe to symbolize the darkness that they have ushered into the incomes of the coffee farmers. We have 12.5 million Ugandans whose livelihoods depend on the coffee value chain. So after darkness at noon, the strangers in the chambers manhandled, lifted MPs, and among them, I managed to see in that darkness the MP for Kampala, the woman MP for Kampala, Honorable Shamim Malende, and I don't know where they were taking them. As if that was not enough, the kangaroo manner in which the bill was passed, only 5 clauses were read. The rest of the clauses were not read, and it is challengeable as to whether indeed that bill was enacted into law, because the rules of Parliament are very clear. At the second reading of the bill, the MPs debate and pass clause by clause. This did not happen. So, and it can be challenged in courts of law. So these are my, quite long, but I thought this background was necessary for the debate. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, when you were talking, I was also asking myself, would there be a possibility to have this contested in the courts of law? And I'm glad you've actually shared that insight. Thank you, Sarah. Joseph, just quickly, your thoughts about how this particular, there are other agencies that were equally rationalized, but the coffee drew so much interest, like I said, because of how things have been handled way back from before actually Wednesday sitting. But I want you to address your submission to just the events that surrounded the way things were handled in Parliament on Wednesday.
You're right. We have discussed this matter quite at length. Ugandan elites have been reasonably engaged, but in my opinion, insufficiently, because there is one of the few things that sort of frustrate me, corridor talks, and many of these ones in social media space expertise. And yet the following morning is business as usual. It's quite clearly the case that anybody who has got ears to listen should listen to what Sarah said and what we've talked about this thing. This coffee thing is really about Museveni, his family, his brother Bireete, and the monopolization of a national crop, which somehow is now reclaiming its space, both in terms of popularity, but also its values at the global markets. So quite clearly, the alternative goal is here, and Mr. Museveni, for whatever reason, some of which are obviously obvious, is determined to take full control. So state monopoly is basically, as Sarah says, completely rid Mr. Museveni control. But people out there are also talking about the fact that there is a deliberate ploy by the establishment to make sure that coffee growers, who are not few, are locked in, as Sarah says, that beyond growing and benefiting from the little that they can get per their kilograms, are not involved in any way as part of in the value chain, value addition, and in any case, therefore, they are not able to get as much as they should get, meaning, therefore, that make Ugandans poor, check them as you continue to swim in the trillions. That said, what I saw happening in the National Assembly on Wednesday makes me continuously think of a gentleman called Francis Butagira, who was UPC's last speaker. This guy is a retired judge and a decent man, and
it's a decent OB.
And by some,
Are you aware?
By some chance, he went to Ontario School. He's one of those few exceptional guys who went to Ontario School, but thanks to the schooling, political schooling of Mwiri, a very decent last Mr. Speaker. There's no way in which whatever happened in the National Assembly on Wednesday should have happened. There's no way in which, thankfully, it would ever have happened in a future UPC government, certainly not in the Water 2 government, when there was major contestation in Parliament and in the streets of Kampala and across the country, particularly in Uganda. And in Water 1 administrations, we had issues, but not to this extent. I just feel that if you see the Black Mamba incidents, if you see the jumping into Parliament by the special forces, and you see a continuation of this happening on Wednesday, the manner in which the security forces were there, the manner in which you see Nita Mongi coming at the gates of Parliament, which Parliament we used to walk in as a matter of routine as youngsters and as ordinary citizens with absolute pride. Even me as a detainee under NRA, whenever was then going to report, because President's office was fourth floor, old Parliament building, and I'd go there on a daily basis.
To report yourself?
Yeah, to report, yes. Before, as I was planning my escape. One time, a driver, actually, President's office driver, I nearly mentioned his name, told me that, Joseph, what are you doing here? But he met me actually around the entrance as I was going in and I was coming. So Joseph,
he didn't know you were reporting?
No, he knew he was conveying a message to me.
Okay.
And he was telling me in Uganda. So even then, you could walk in and come out. So that is that Parliament. And fast forward now, is some kind of military garrison, some kind of establishments, almost Museveni's Kapeka, the Kabamba of those days when the bandits in the bush, things like that. What it actually shows to young Ugandans absorbing this, I can tell you, it doesn't show anything nice. I was telling a program yesterday, Thursday, that I have a fantastic, my grandson has just turned 6 and fantastic and decent and extremely clever and doing very well at school, and I'm blessed and I thank God for him. But continuously, let's say, this little boy actually once in a while may stumble on television and watch some of these other things. And I tell people that, well, one of my biggest prides, Sarah, is that I've never fought, Comrade Awich. since I was a kid. I want to keep repeating that for you young guys. I've never put even over a tiny little ball. And then you show this to little children who watch, including my grandson. And you show this to the young guys, that, including the majority of the audiences for this civic space. And people whom we are trying to train, and people like you, Sarah, in your agencies and academies, and some of the work that you do with young people, some of which you've involved me in some of these leadership programs, encouraging young people to go into public spaces. And we are saying that this is a lesson for some of our people, that we're training them, that somehow some of them get into politics. Some of them get therefore into parliament and become legislators, and they're given titles called honorables. And a honorable, they're surrounded, of course, by these commando guys, but at the same time, they themselves, amongst themselves, whatever the arrangements, I get the point that Zake may have been provoked, and possibly so. I just don't, maybe looking at it from my perspective, I'm not quite sure whether, if I was going back to my seat at that time as a honorable member of parliament, and a colleague has taken a seat, and somebody has taken my seat. I know he's already very much agitated about what's going on. I am not quite sure whether I would push a colleague, one. Number two, I am not quite sure if I would actually not even dramatize that, to expose him, because in this case he would have won, meaning Zake.
But also, if you were the colleague who was occupying... I'm coming to the colleague. I'm coming to the colleague. The behavior of a call and whatever the circumstances, I genuinely don't understand. But you could see from the videos that they were having some mini exchanges, as it was on some kind of mini phone. Yes. So whatever, before the altercation, but whatever the case, there is no circumstance, unless, and I've seen this in football where I think Zidane was compelled to punch in the World Cup kind of stuff. When somebody was very personal. I don't know what Zake would have told a call to have warranted, even if pushed as a colleague, in parliament, in that level of safety, to have warranted a response as a bloc. So it really, beyond NRM 7, it tells you about the national climate in which you're operating as a country. And generally, you guys, it genuinely worries me. Because while we discuss politics, we also discuss how young children in primary schools are rigging and buying people over votes. And then we go on to the politics of violence. And then we go to the National Assembly. That really, beyond parliament, the next other office is establishments of the judiciary. These are exemplary, supposed to be exemplary leaders. It really, really worries me. And after 40 years, where we need to be seeking to go into a transition of pluralist polity, when bushmen retire, and we have men and women of civility, and we see whatever's happening in the National Assembly is extremely unfortunate. Thank you, Joseph. Major Awich, if you could just also weigh me in on this.
Thank you so much. I know the climax of this submission should be with the events in Parliament. So, but I'll pass on a few comments on something before then I climax with that. First of all, the Kisozi visit by the caucus. The caucus of Parliament, NRM caucus, is an organ of the party established under the party constitution. It's just like you have Women League by Honorable Wanyoto, or Workers League by my OB of Ntare Kolu, the chairman Workers League.
Wherever.
Yes. Okay. Then you have the Entrepreneur by Rukari and all those. Now, NRM Parliamentary Caucus is an organ of the party established under the party constitution, just like those leagues have said. Therefore, they are always summoned as and when by the chief whip and more so by the chairman. Now, the visit in Kisozi had nothing to do with coffee. Nothing to do with coffee.
What was the agenda?
The visit, this visit by a parliamentary caucus followed a visit by cabinet, which I went under SEC, because the president invited the ministers and SEC to go and see in this environment how he had endeavored to lift people out of poverty. Those in coffee, those in cattle.
So that has been happening for quite a while now.
Yes, but this is it. So the other one for the cabinet for us, when we went...
Can you allow me one on Kisozi? So is Kisozi a demonstration of lifting people out of poverty?
the president, in his wisdom, decided to demonstrate. So whether demonstration there is wrong to you, that is it, but he chose to say, he said, when I came here, people here were so poor. But I couldn't live among the poor people. So I said, while I take upon uplifting poverty nationally, but these neighbors of mine, let me do something. Let me use them as demonstration. So he did it. So he always says, while I am tackling it at a national level, but there this I've done in my neighborhood, so come and see. So we went with ministers, we saw it. When we were having a meal there, the president said it is late. We can't now discuss what we have seen. Can we discuss in cabinet? Then he said, by extension, therefore, the SEC members who are not members of cabinet, I use my discretion as chairman to invite you. Indeed, I was a member of cabinet for one day. We discussed it. Now, members of the parliamentary caucus also said, we also want to go and see the same thing. So this time they're invited. Same for a chairman, LC1, who asked a question, that why are you silent on coffee? Because it was not the agenda of the day. So that is as far as the parliamentary caucus visit to Kisozi was concerned. It had nothing to do with coffee at all. Now, let me talk about Museveni's views on coffee itself. The views on coffee is that the coffee, to generate the expansion of coffee was actually done by UPDF under wealth creation. And the number of seedlings in millions is counted. Even the one where the Kabaka of Buganda was called upon was still support to him to engage, but it was mainly the army. Therefore, UCDA is a child of the government. And there's no way you can find me a witch when I'm transferring my son, and you, or even so when I have lost a child and you cry more than me. If government had a sinister motive on coffee, it was easy to even just cripple UCDA there. UCDA is a birth of government, and therefore it is the same government bringing it back to the ministry. And in any case, when we are establishing, people didn't even know it would work as good as it is. Now, who tells you that when it is brought back, it will not even work better? And maybe after 5 years, when we try to take it back to UCD, I said, no, leave it in the ministry. I said, but you were refusing. Just like when we're establishing, you had no idea. And when we're moving. So this is a government child, and government is trying to make it better. Now, on what Sarah says about the private ownership and the government monopoly, I'm seeing it play out even in a constitutional petition. Because this is a matter that surrounds rights, let us set the law in operation. One good thing is that when a law is set in operation, it can be checked by the other arm of government, that is the judiciary. If it appears unconstitutional and interferes with private property and private rights, then somebody is free to challenge it. I would be happy if it was found that the operationalization of this item contradicts provisions of rights or provision of, because we live in a free economy. At what point do you change from free economy to a monopoly economy? So if what you are saying is true, then we still have the other arm of government, the judiciary, to challenge it at an appropriate time. On the issue of SFC, SFC is an arm of the army. It's part of the army. It's part of UPDF, by the way. Just like you have military police, like you have artillery, like you have air force. FC is part of the, only that this one has a task to carry out. But the commander-in-chief can deploy as and when. When, for example, you find that police is insufficient, because the Constitution says the police shall request from UPDF. So it is that provision, that window in the Constitution, that the police shall request from UPDF, that UPDF always comes. They can send military police, or they can send regular battalion, but they can also send SFC. Now,
if you don't mind, do you think they might have sent, the police might have sent for reinforcement on this occasion?
Normally, that is the standard procedure. Before SFC, before any soldier comes on the street, that is what happens.
But also, Major, what kind of threats would the government have envisaged to actually warrant that degree or level of deployment with outside the premises and also inside?
The kind of, that is easy to answer. The kind of threat, as you see, Zake was being interviewed, even outside Parliament. there were already intelligence gathering from the likes of Zake that we have had enough. We are going to fight. You saw it, a clear pronouncement. For us now, there's no discussion, we are going to fight. Pronouncement were going on, public and otherwise. So that would have had enough for the security. Said, let's make precautions so that there's no confusion. Utterances were made. You saw it is on record, Zake, even before he entered Parliament. And there were similar pronouncements everywhere. So that warranted a precautionary measure. Now, about darkness in Parliament, I don't, because the matter of Parliament should strictly be guarded by procedures. And I will talk on two issues in procedures. So, I don't know what caused the darkness, whether it is deliberate or accidental, but the idea was to remove the members who had been suspended. Because you see, ideally when 12 members...
In darkness.
When 12 members are suspended, ideally they should walk out.
Yeah.
If they don't walk out, Sergeant at Arms is an organ of Parliament. It's supposed to remove them by force. There's an office called Office of the Sergeant at Arms.
Yes.
Now, if Sergeant at Arms feels it is incapacitated by manpower, especially when the suspension is a group of suspension, if it is, say, Honorable Sechikubo, you are suspended. Honorable Sechikubo can be removed by Sergeant at Arms. But where there are 12 people, you may need some manpower.
Oh, okay, so let's talk about the Zake situation. Couldn't the Sergeant at Arms also effectively handle that, as opposed to having a whole military deployment within Parliament?
No, the Zake didn't need deployment, and it wasn't. Let me say this. So the darkness and the intervention of the non-uniform people was an attempt of a manpower to eject a big number of people under suspension. And as I said, if you suspend one, like Honorable Sechikubu, for example, that one first is expected to walk out diplomatically once a pronouncement of suspension is made. And a member of Parliament is expected to walk out on his own. But if a member of Parliament does not walk out on his own, the Sergeant at Arms does it. But the confusion comes when there are big number of people suspended. But as to whether these people thought that if you do it in open, the alternation may sound ugly or may look ugly, that is it.
But
now this makes me talk of...
I'm really, really sorry. Because in any case, actually, on the basis of what you're saying, to me it would look not only more scary, but actually much more risky that you plunge the assembly into darkness under that climate.
As I said,
so the likelihood of actually real violence taking place is
the matter of rules and how bad it is can be assessed with time. Now here comes the position of passing clause by clause. That is also envisaged under the rules. Now, we need to interrogate whether there was suspension of a rule, because some rules in Parliament can be suspended. For example, you can ask for a suspension of a rule to make an omnibus passing, okay? Now, but that rule has to be suspended in accordance to the rules that, I don't know whether Chief Whip Oboa tried to raise for a suspension of a rule. Now, if you suspend a rule, which must be agreed by the House, you suspend a rule that we are not going to go through the rule by passing clause by clause, and therefore you make an omnibus passing, that is up to the rule. This is yet subject for interrogation. Now, the events itself, and that maybe is about what you're asking about, the ejection of Zake. Now, the events, the fighting is really unfortunate. And the congressman seems to allude to say the net should be cast on NRM because after 40 years, he is implying that the social fabric of the society is dead. Yes. That is what the congressman is alluding. But I think it is not true. But that is what he's saying. But it's bad. Now, when you look at these two, they have their own history. Zake has a history of violence, of fighting, of being beaten many times. Akol has a history. Akol has a history of fighting. Remember, Akol is the one who beat Otoa Donga.
Yeah, in the last Parliament.
He's the one who beat Otoa Donga. Now it's again this one. So you can see both parties have history on their own. And good enough, their history is not connected to NRM. For us, we have our discipline cadres. Their history is separate. They have all history of fighting. There's no history of cadreship of NRM. It is all unfortunate. What I could see is that
clearly it is associated to their age. A call is tall, but it's a very young man. I know him.
Age and also character, because
Yes.
we certainly have a
You
lot
see,
of younger
age-
people in Parliament who carry themselves.
Age has a sense of consciousness and emotion control and emotional intelligence. It's like alcohol. When you have an impaired sense of mind, like for example, if I'm drunk, if I was drunk, I don't drink. If I was drunk and you tell me, Major Witch, you are stupid, the reaction I would have when you tell me, Major Witch, you are stupid when I'm not drunk is different. If you tell
How
me,
do you know how drunkard
when you tell me, Major Witch, you're stupid when I'm sober, I'll say it's up to you. It's your business. I don't care. Should you say the same statement when I'm drunk? I would tell you out of you. How can you say I'm too stupid? I went to Ntare school. I'm a lawyer. And yet the same. So it is a sense of mind. Now for the young, you look at footballers, Rooney and Ronaldo. When they were young in the football pitch, any slight tug on Rooney would stand up to kick you. He would stand up to beat you. Same thing Ronaldo. But you could see that as they age, as they mature in the field, you could even kick Rooney like twice, he would look at you. You kick Ronaldo like twice, he would look at you. So Akol is a very young man. I know his brother.
What are the ages?
His brother is a major and a lawyer. I know his brother who he grew up in his, and he's a young man. He's just a tall man. But the same thing with Zake. Therefore, maybe this would impact on our voters. The voters now has a lot of parameters to choose from. Does age matter? Does maturity matter? How do you judge our voters? But of course, we now plunge into a deep topic of our voting pattern, where it involves money and buying alcohol and all this. But I think this should cast an indication to voters on the character, the temperament, and the nature and maturity of our honorable members.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Major. So let me come back to what Sarah and Joseph said earlier about the militarization. And of course, the weaponization of institutions, which we clearly see. Anyone can actually see what is happening, whether it's in the judiciary or in our parliament. And basically what this means to the legislations that we pass. Is it actually for the benefit of average citizens? Is it that these institutions are being militarized and weaponized to actually disadvantage the majority of Ugandans who are the voters and are not people of means?
Well, before we go to the voters, first I want to underscore the fact that the title of honorable that we bestow upon MPs is not a charitable title. No. The same applies to the Fountain of Honor. These are very serious titles created in the Constitution. And the conduct of the individuals who enjoy these titles should be distinguishable. So when you have, let me start with the Fountain of Honor. When you have a Fountain of Honor characterizing dissent as terrorism, as criminals, and it's aired on public TVs and the children are watching, what are you teaching people? What are you teaching society? A Fountain of Honor is the moral compass of a country.
Yep.
So we have a Fountain of Honor, and one of the events was the canonization of one of the ministers. And this is a religious function. And the president is calling people criminals just because they don't agree with him on an issue. One of the MPs challenged and said, and is an NRM MP and said, send us to Chiburi. These are our CID headquarters if we are criminals. Like, what are you talking about? So we have normalized the characterization of dissent as treason, as terrorism in this country under President Museveni's tenure. And he's the champion of this. He's the champion. You disagree with him, you are a terrorist. You deserve not to live in a multi-party dispensation. It is unforgivable. So when you have a moral compass of a nation degenerating to throwing words, and heavy words at that, just because of mere political dissent, what did you expect? What do you expect young people to do? They think that's what the leadership should be. On top of this, you weaponize everything. You militarize. You will have a shutdown. And indeed, you wake up as a commander-in-chief of the forces, you surround Parliament with SFC. What message are you sending?
Safety.
It's a war.
Recall.
And they had declared that this is a war. So the Fountain of Honor, on top of not showing morals, demonstrating morals to the nation, he abuses institutions. The conduct, and this conduct is similar to the raid during the age limit debate.
Yeah.
The conduct to deploy SFC everywhere at Parliament just because of dissent by MPs. As if Parliament is supposed to enact laws in a chorus, black sheep kind of thing. So you have, yes, because this is what the president expects. That Parliament, he wants something, they just sing black sheep and they clap. So he cannot contain simple dissent in an arena of debate, which is Parliament. You abuse Parliament, which is a temple of democracy, a sanctity of our democracy as a people, as a sovereign. You abuse the army, which is the army of the nation, not your personal entity, just because of mere dissent. Really, we deserve better.
Thank you, Sarah. Joseph, the militarization and weaponization of institutions.
It's been emphasized, and as I said, the only thing is that maybe those of us who've known this as a military regime from day one and consider it as such, we just thought that the longer it went, the more modest and moderate it would be. I have actually argued that away from Margaret Thatcher, the British Prime Minister who gave us Idi Amin, Ted Heath, a very conservative man, continued in Parliament and became the father of the House, meaning the longest serving member of Parliament. In the 90s, shortly before his death and before departing Parliament, Sarah, Ted Heath, who was a former Prime Minister and conservative par excellence, had in his signature corner where he sits in Parliament become amongst the most sensible and reasonable voices of reason in the National Assembly. Age, maturity and experience, leadership and polity and experience and wisdom, including ability, comrade of which to concede that you guys, we got it wrong here. By the way, when we were in the bush, when we went to Kapeka, we nearly wanted to do that. One of those days when we blew up a taxi, we wanted actually to blow up another, but it was supposed to be good, we didn't. We blew up this taxi to Kitgum, but maybe it was wrong, we didn't do it, looking backwards. Wisdom and growth going up. What I expect of Mr. Museveni, really at this stage, is for him to be leading us to that modesty, in language, including beginning to talk to his Bazukulu. And comrade Richard, this, I'm going to say this on air for the first time. Many times people ask me, is there anything good that NR has done? And is there anything Museveni can do for you to say thank you, to acknowledge, recognize him? Guys, genuinely the truth is zero. But comrade, which I also want to tell you, that in the very unlikely event, this is very important actually on air, in the very likely event that say in the last 5 years, Mr. Museveni had started talking modesty, and see him getting tired, and even some nuances, some of the people whom he calls around in some of his circles, that, I'm told this day is actually quite tolerant in certain sections, I must say that, within his own guys. If Mr. Museveni reached such a stage, it's a bit of contradiction, but there's a point I'm making, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
If he reached a stage in which he was able to begin to say, look guys, we've had a little bit of this. Calm down, guys, calm down. So that the language of terror, the language of abuse, the language of rape, the language of impunity, seals away from this guy. And you see him as a genuine national figure, seeking to move on and seeking to prepare transition. Even if he's not seeking to concede ground for us in UPC and others. But is that generally moving on? Comrade Awich actually would give me some certain respect. Not this one anymore and this particular time. It's very unfortunate, but quickly. You know, Comrade Awich talked about age. I'm actually not sure that the age of Akol and the age of Zake is the issue. No, it is character, and it is the climate in which we've grown. And it is it is terribly, terribly bad culture, as Sarah says. I don't know in primary school, when I was a prefect throughout, I don't know at what stage bad kids would behave like this. Number two, contemporary post Mr. Museveni Parliament that we hope and do expect from Awich. You know, we don't want an assembly in which we have people who want to go to be experts in boxing. No, it is basically what Sarah says, that the culture of intolerance, the culture of impunity, the culture of getting away with it, and maybe for those of us who represent political parties, that would be very like in my case, political parties that have been in government, but political parties that have actually led multi-party parliament, regardless of our own shortcomings. That you see that by the time you actually become an active, for you young viewers, particularly become an active considered candidate for a parliamentary seat in Bushenyi Central, you must have the character, you must have the background, you must have the organization, you must have the integrity. They must really, really, really be sure to say, this so-and-so's daughter at 21, no, we trust her. And I believe at 23, they can give you the opportunity to go into the National Assembly to beat the other person who's possibly 60, whatever the age. I think those are the issues. So young guys, no, this is not it. You know, this country is better. It is possible for us to have it better. This sub-region is better. This continent is amazingly seeking better. You saw how young guys critically contributed to the change that took place in Botswana in terms of electoral terms. They, notwithstanding what everyone else did, they did. I think it's actually possible for young Ugandans to begin to dump that, go for reason. Dump individualism, go for issues. And I think it's possible to say that, look, this country does not only believe and belong to and deserve better, we genuinely do, because better is possible in this country. We need to begin looking for decency rather than some of this mess that has been now almost being perfected as part of our life.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Joseph. Major, I know when we're talking about that weaponization and militarization of institutions, definitely, I do believe or assume that your perception of it is different. You're looking at this from the security point of view. When the army deploys in Parliament, for instance, it's there to prevent or avert a possibility of a threat from taking place. But from where the majority of us as civilians do sit, we do not look at it from that point of view, and that definitely also ends up creating a lot of questions and also a trust deficit on the part of citizens towards their government. I don't know how you...
Look, what you think I understand is far from what I think, and I will demonstrate.
I would love to.
I will demonstrate, but I have two things to comment before I go to weaponization. Sarah made an extensive comment about our behaviors in society. She started off with the title Honorable, which is a title we should be bestowed accordingly. She dwelt on the fountain of honor. And of course I found that, as I always say, she had to squeeze this in. Because as I've always said that we always fall in a trap of every topic to talk about the negativities in power and the person of Museveni.
Yes.
Even if the topic was about germination of a seed.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's
Because he must create a conducive environment.
It and bring it here. So, but for the avoidance of doubt, the person of Museveni is a very perfect fountain of honor. First of all, Museveni is a person who, once he has said something, he keeps it. Even if he said it how many years, he will work for it. Two, he doesn't entertain double dealing. It's very open. Some of us who have worked closely, if you try to do that, he will rebuke you. He respects the rule of law. And above all, you have read in books and stories how some heads of state
even play around with liquor, with alcohol. Museveni has told you he has never. So he's a sober man, 24 hours, very clear with his personality. So he's a perfect fountain of honor. No doubt about that.
The words.
Perfect.
Okay? Yes, it's
The words.
Really. So the words, his diction, his choice of words are very calculated, and he means it. And if you want, he will get time, he will explain to you further. If you choose to put it out of context, that's another thing. So about the person of the Museveni, the fountain of honor, the Museveni that I know doesn't test alcohol, the serene Museveni is a perfect fountain of honor. You can't compare with any other president around the world. Okay, the other thing is, what good thing has Museveni done? You see, I was with my Congress friend in some place, and he raised the issue that lightning had killed people in Lamour.
Yes.
And therefore he was saying this lightning should be attached or tagged to NRM. And he did it rightly. I agreed with him personally. He said that any government should have housing policy. Which housing policy should have lightning arresters? So if government allows a building of a public place without lightning arresters, then we blame it on government. Then I said that you are absolutely right. We NRM take lightning, we take the fault. Now what does this mean? It means therefore there is nothing in Uganda that happens without government. And I've always illustrated that no news is good news. Because the rest of the good things that you don't hear, Congress, those are Museveni. The few that you hear are wrong things. So therefore, waste no time in saying what has Museveni done. The silent things are the bad, good ones. All. Because you have said yourself that lightning is a blame on Museveni. I have always said here that when there's a fight in a power between Acholis and Madi, government has failed. When Batoro are happy with Bunyoro, they don't say government has succeeded. In other words, the way you blame the government for lightning is to show you that everything happening is good for it, a good thing by Museveni. The only ones which pick up news are the few bad things. So waste no time in saying what has Museveni done. The rest of the good things are Museveni, except for the few. Now, the last example I can tell you for Museveni's good thing, the freedom of speech. Why you are seated here?
No, I reject.
Here you are seated here.
No, I reject.
Peacefully.
No,
discussing.
No, comrade.
That is the
Comrade, I reject. No, I do not get my right to speak from Museveni. I don't get my right of speech from anybody. Right of speech is a basic fundamental human right on freedom for all the citizens of the world. And in Uganda, my right is derived by my right as a citizen of this country.
Where does right
from my father,
come from?
My grandfather, inherent. My father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. Oboth, father. Idon, his father. Ojwang, Masanja.
That's your chain.
Oh yes, those are my chains.
I think I'm still holding the microphone.
You are.
You see, I have said here that if you don't think and you don't thank those who fight for rights and freedom, that is when you will say rights are inherent. I can assure you there are people who have fought and died for rights, meaning that rights are earned. For example, do you think at some time you'd say a slave has a right with a master? These rights were fought for. Would you say the king has the same right with a subject? These rights were fought for. So rights have been developing and earned, and we should create those who work for it. If rights were that born, how comes when somebody commits murder, the right to life is removed if you think it is inherent and permanent? But why is right? So, colleagues, rights are earned, and there's historical development to right, and right has never been there forever. Right has never been there for
how that becomes one for which I have to thank Mr. Museveni for my right, I have no clue.
Like you say, then why is the government always cracking down and clamping down on peaceful protesters who are actually fighting for their own rights? Why does that happen?
Allow me one question also, so that he answers at once. Afande, I think to settle this thing of rights, help me answer one question. Every citizen has a right to life, and you alluded to it in your concluding remarks. So should we thank Mr. Museveni for oxygen because we have a right to life?
I don't think you're putting it the other way around. First of all, I want to put it clear that if you say right as inherent, you deny the freedom fighters who have fought for right from the days. Take for example the American rights. You know the historical names there in America. You know people who have fought for rights all over the world. Now, if you say right is born, then how about those who develop? I have already said that if this thing was natural, would you say a slave had the same right like a master?
They do.
So rights are earned, and that is why we come to government. What is the role of government?
The rights of others.
The role of government here is to codify it. Codification means writing it down. Codification means having courts to protect it. Okay? Codification means having institutions to have it like human rights institutions. Therefore, you thank the government for saying this right is there, put it in codification, put the courts to guard it, put the institutions to protect it, and it is worked for, and it is guaranteed under a written law. And that is how you thank government for that.
But if that is the case,
yes,
Julie, that's actually doing what they're supposed to do in terms of protecting these rights, in terms of creating that environment that actually allows citizens to exercise
they are doing.
rights.
The mistake that we see is that when the state comes in to say, when you are enjoying your right, don't interfere with mine, because the state is the arbiter. Now, when the state comes to do that, like for the case of protesters, they're saying you're demonstrating, you're protesting, please exercise your right, but don't violate others. That is when they blame government for it. But I think you have a question about weaponization. Okay, weaponization, contrary to what you thought, weaponization means this, colleagues. If, for example, in Gaza, okay, you withhold food for the Gaza people in Middle East so that you cow them. You see this? The withholding food to control them is what is called weaponization. In other words, you should have used a bomb to blow them, but now you're using food. So when you talk of weaponization of politics in this context, it is completely misplaced and a wrongful use of the words, a wrong diction. There is no weaponization of politics in this case. Weaponization means you use that in lieu of what you would have used. Like you use money, for example, monetization of politics. Monetization for politics means instead of persuading somebody, you use the money. So weaponization would mean you actually use the gun to get what you, which is not the case. Here, the preemptive position where members of the community, some elements are put in word of mouth. You saw it is on record. We can see it on the video. Where Zake had said, for us, we have come to fight. There is nothing about peace today. And if yesterday was Wednesday, the talk was on Monday, it was on Tuesday, what kind of a state would you be if you can't deploy for protection? You had the Zake talking it on Monday, you had them shouting on Tuesday, they are saying we are going for war, we are not going for this. On Wednesday, a state, what's its nature, cannot deploy for peace. And you call it weaponization?
The head of state himself has also alluded to this as war. He has also used war as a terminology in reference to this law. So then shouldn't he equally be held to a certain degree of scrutiny for also using those kinds of
aggravating
words?
it, yeah.
When it comes to an argument that actually should not be...
I have not had the context in which he said it. It is you saying it. But what I want to conclude here is weaponization of a circumstance it means you use that thing to cower down people. Like in Gaza, you withhold food to cow them so that they die of hunger. Instead, so you are using weapon instead of throwing a bomb to kill them, you have withheld food. So in this case, weaponization is a misplacement of words and it is not applicable. What was done is safe precaution because members of the public had publicly gone to say we are going to fight. And a state was its salt should just deploy. And by the way, you don't see to know how much preemptives cost. I've always said, if you get an electrician to wire this house properly, and this house doesn't catch fire, you may possibly pay him 2 million. But if this house catches fire, it is in billions.
Major,
deployment for precaution is good.
I want us to conclude on the issue of weaponization before we move on to the US elections. You are giving an example of Gaza. Gaza is in active conflict right now. And when you see what is happening, the weaponization of aid and so on, it is something that you can relate to immediately. We are not in active combat, but the weaponization that is being used by the state may not be as obvious as what we do see in Gaza, but certainly it is happening. Even if it happens in a very subtle and covert form, it is there. It is there. But like I'm saying, depending on where you're sitting, for example, if you are sitting as government, you're going to be blinded to this reality. But as citizens, we do see that there is this level
weaponization of food, for example. Weaponization of food means withholding the food. Now, what is weaponization of politics? Are you withholding the politics?
You can abuse, manipulate political actors to actually make decisions that favor the government.
I repeat, weaponization of food means you remove food to achieve an objective. Now, weaponization of politics, you remove politics. Can you remove politics?
No.
Can you remove politics to achieve what?
If I may come in on that, Afanda, which is
yes.
Weaponization of politics is actually the literal meaning. It's taking guns to resolve political arguments.
And that is weaponization.
Yes.
That's a wrong choice of words.
Let's move to the US election.
I just wanted to read before we move. Article 20 of the Constitution, fundamental and other human rights and freedoms. Clause subsection 1. Fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual are inherent and not granted by the state. Clause 2. The rights and freedoms of individuals and groups enshrined in this chapter shall be respected, upheld, and promoted by all organs and agencies of government and all persons. So why am I reading this? Rights are not granted by the state. The duty of the state is to respect and promote
and protect
rights.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let us move to the US elections, whose outcomes we already know. Donald Trump won by 293 electoral college votes. He also won the popular vote. Of course, the congratulatory messages are coming in from across the world. And a lot of people say, well, this is the greatest political comeback in US history or in the history of elections, wherever it has happened. And of course, a lot of Trump is a man of many firsts, like we all know. First former president of the US in modern times to be elected again after losing an election. He'll be the first president to be impeached twice and get re-elected. The first president to be convicted in a criminal court and found liable in a civil court. He's still facing a federal indictment and a potential trial over allegations that he tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election. But at his victory speech, he promised to turn around the economy and to ensure that Americans become prosperous. He has promised deep tax cuts, and of course there are concerns that U.S. trade with Canada could be disrupted by the tariffs that he will impose. I think we saw the US-China trade war in 2018. So other countries are also thinking, okay, what does this mean for us? So of course, against illegal immigrants, Trump says he's not against people going to America, but rather people should enter America legally. But the question but most people are asking is, of course, what went wrong on the Democratic side? And of course, Americans have spoken through their vote. What are they telling the world? What does a Trump election mean, a Trump win mean to Africa, mean to Uganda, and also to wars around the world, the war in Ukraine, the genocide in Gaza, and so on and so on. I'll just start with your quick reactions. I know, Sarah, you were rooting for Kamala Harris. You were also rooting for Kamala Harris. Major, who was your candidate? Were you rooting for Trump?
Trump.
Okay. Very interesting. Congratulations. So, how did you feel when you actually saw the votes trickling in, the calls coming in from the different states? And I must say, when I woke up and I just saw the gap, I think it was just hard to you could clearly tell that Trump was headed for a clean win.
Well, previously I used to stay up the night and wait for results, starting with the Obama excitement in 2008. And I had made that a culture to really watch. I had my own private watch party each time. Each time there were elections in the US. Until this one, my heart told me to just go to sleep. Let the Americans be, and let them decide their leaders. You will wake up and catch up. So I went to bed and purposed to wake up at 5. And putting on CNN, Kamala Harris had 3 electoral votes versus 97 Trump. I went back to bed. I knew really she would need a miracle to win. But also what was clear was that the trickle-in of results were mainly from the rural, smaller states. And the swing states had not come in, mostly urban, that are cosmopolitan in nature. So the little hope remained, but really the big hope was dashed at that margin. And as I kept watching, then once in 96, over 80 something, I said, no, this thing is not working. Yeah. So it was like a contrast of what the Obama election was. Because Obama was like, boo, 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 from the beginning up to, and that's how Trump won both the popular vote as well as the electoral college, 292 versus 244. And I don't know who has finally won the House of...
the Senate was being taken
by Republican. The Senate is already gone, but the Congress...
The Congress, not yet, I think. As I was checking this afternoon, it had not yet.
Yeah, so, so basically the people, the majority Americans, chose to give this chance to Republicans. What does it mean, or what happened to the Democrats? In my view, this election had about 4 defining factors. One was the vote of the women that was in favor of Kamala Harris, the vote of the youth, the Gen Zs, and the last campaigns, Kamala Harris tried to reach out to the young people who were a sizable number of the voters, college students and others, but also the defining factors on reproductive health rights, immigration, the economy, border security, and the foreign policy. When you look at the foreign policy of the Democrats versus the Republicans' foreign policy is America first. The rest of the issues, the rest of the world is secondary. When you look at, and that's where they get their slogan of Make America Great. Yeah, again, MAGA. But when you look at the Democrats, they are interested in multilateral cooperations, alliances, and that's what has led to or their support for the war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East, and always, as they say, standing with their allies. The college students, University of Columbia and others, had had a 3-month sit-down against the war in Gaza. So it was not easy for Kamala Harris to tilt the Gen Z's vote in her favor. Yet these students and many young people were against the war in Gaza, especially in the Middle East. The second issue was reproductive health, reproductive rights, that comes in with 2 issues: the reproductive health, the abortion rights, and LGBTQ. And that's for the Democrats. On the other hand, the Republicans, who are conservatives, are promoting family values, parental guidance in schools, and the Republicans are saying the children have a right to choose their gender. The Democrats and the Republicans are saying, no, you have your gender at birth. You know, and the American society is stark divided. It's almost 50-50 on these issues. And this was clearly demonstrated in the votes. And then the issue of gender versus race also came in and affected Kamala Harris's performance. Whereas she thought she had advantage of the women, the white women did not vote for her. But also where she thought she would have advantage of the cosmopolitan population, in immigrants and others, the black men did not stand with her. And this effect was demonstrated on the ballot. And maybe, since Trump has now gone on record as a presidential candidate that has stood in the way for the first woman president in the greatest nation on earth, the superpower, by defeating both Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. And maybe America is not yet ready for the woman president, and that's really, you know, it has a chilling effect on this gender of ours globally.
That's interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate, because personally I was looking forward to really celebrating the first female president of the greatest nation. It's not yet. It's not yet time. We have to wait much longer.
Yeah.
And it's really disappointing. I don't know what needs to be done. But also in the way for Kamala Harris, as I try to conclude so that the colleagues could also come in. In her way also, you know, the first woman vice president, now vying to be the first woman president after Hillary Clinton. Then some people were uncomfortable with having the second black president after Obama. And some people were even uncomfortable with having a first black Asian woman, a combination of 3. And that also affected her performance, her personal qualities and competencies notwithstanding. And this is also really disappointing. And maybe I would leave, Michael, let me stop there.
So, Joseph, Trump 2.0 comes in, gives us this impression of he's more experienced, no doubt about that, after being in the White House, in the Oval Office for 5 years. He is more confident. I don't think I have seen a more confident Trump than when he was actually giving his victory speech. He is so composed, so confident, so sure of himself. And yeah, the experience definitely also comes in handy. But I was watching a commentary, I think, on Al Jazeera, and the journalist was saying, well, he comes in with the experience, but he also comes in with some grievances. and scores to settle. I don't know what your thoughts are, General, about his victory and whether his experience actually adds or makes him a better president this time than he was before.
As a matter of interest, I know a little about Trump, which is possibly not necessarily public knowledge, and that is one of the what they would call mind masters. One of these people who are a club of rich, elite people who have used the science of the brains to succeed in some of their projects. That included Warren Buffett and Arnold Schwarzenegger, plus a few others, one of whom is someone whom I was privileged to have met in different circles not very far from Oprah Winfrey. So if then these guys, just struck me on this, then these are people who are completely decisive, completely focused on their missions, whatever their missions are. The fact that he gets humiliated as a one-term president, he gets convicted. The UK Guardian newspaper, the most authentic publication of the broad left, in the world, writes a headline that says America elects the first convicted criminal as president. So notwithstanding all those, he goes through this thing and is elected so massively, when actually a few days ago he had been written off. He had every reason, and being the artist and being the player that he is, that is where you see his confidence coming from. But that's it, credit to him. I must say that while I congratulate Comrade Awich and the NRM guys, because that was their candidate, and to my surprise and disappointment, and many Africans that I still find very, very strange and awkward, and many women, including African women. Trump officially is a misogynist, although he's now officially president. He's a racist, and he's everything really bad about anything he can present about some of these people that can give people like me the confidence and clarity to be able to say so in public, because it's actually down there, public knowledge. But Trump also, what people don't know, is that Trump is part of the Anglo-Saxon, Caucasian revival movement. That's sort of counterpart of what Sarah said, and that is the rise of the likes of Barack Obama. Trump was the first to lead a campaign to claim that Barack Obama was a Muslim, as if there's anything wrong with being a Muslim. And it lost. He was Kenyan, but that was less about it, but particularly that he's not born in America, and so therefore he would not and did not qualify to be president. So Trump ran with that for 12 months leading to the Democratic Party nominations. It failed. Obama beat Hillary Clinton, and from there on went on to beat John McCain massively convincingly. Now, where is this? Trump had replaced Sarah Palin as amongst these hard-right American conservatives of rural America. Rural America will tend to be much more American than how we look at rural Uganda and other places. So he came in as one of these right-wingers who were there to counter the threat of immigrant migration, meaning the so-called non-white establishment, then blacks, and then in a very specific way, the election of Obama saw a rise of a critical, a rather change of demographics, where women tend to be relatively progressive, so in which case the women going forward would be more likely to be associated with the Democratic Party rather than Conservative Republican Party. Young people, who generally close the group, and you young people, you're fantastic people, are generally very much open-minded and progressive. And then, of course, minorities who also generally, by and large, in majority tend to be. So in American demographics, particularly the demographics that then went and elected Obama, regardless of, Obama was convincingly elected, they felt that unless this was countered, a post-Obama election would mean that with the women, young people their population up, critical number of voters, and minorities, meaning blacks and Hispanics and others. The conservative America, which is basically represented by the privileged white and particularly privileged white men, would almost certainly not be able to come back into government, either in the Republican Party or anywhere else in the near future, as a matter of privilege. And so they sought to counter that. So it's not surprising that Trump rose in response to that. And the established white progressive press, including CNNs of this world, would not like to make this case. And I've actually suggested that maybe I need to do a big write-up and throw it somewhere in the mainstream American media. They would not want to go. But that really basically the underlying thing, almost like Brexit, while people talked about it as immigration, these Western, people from Eastern Europe swamping Britain, Europeans. The original debate on immigration in Britain was really very much about black people, about Africans, the other. We are more of the other than any other white non-British. And that's how Trump came in. So he came in, Joe Biden, white, established, an Obama vice president with an excellent track record, with the mess that Trump committed as president, managed to get rid of him. Poor Joe, he gets a bit old, struggles a little bit, and then Trump, as I said, the Trump engine, if you see from him and Elon Musk, the rest of white America, including ordinary, very poor, average white American who knows nothing from rural Texas, Trump is like their deputy Jesus. Meaning, therefore, Trump and what Trump represents. And so, therefore, it's a very important force that I actually think that a democratic establishment may have underestimated, although I know they tried to fight against it. That sort of really gave rise to Trump, so it's not surprising that he came. And so when Joe Biden was pushed and Pamela Harris came to the credits of the Democrats and democracy, I think it was a wise move, and whatever the outcome, it showed what democracy is, since part of this program is the kind of lessons we can learn as Africans, on this. The Democratic Party reorganized itself and brought in Kamala Harris. Now, Kamala Harris, as they would say, people were saying that she's inexperienced, but no, she's substantially experienced, neat, accomplished woman. And she, by the time a senior citizen of the kind of Joe Biden's are seeking anybody to deputize them, they would really have gone through the process. So she's a fine person. She's possibly not the most charismatic, but in terms of track record and the fact that she had already been a vice president, in any case, was generally a fantastic candidate. But I've got some friends, including from other global media elsewhere, who were covering, and they were simply saying that, well, broader America did not see her as a fantastic candidate. I think they wanted, because she was campaigning against a maverick, I think she needed to have a specific mini character of a sort. She thought all she needed to do was to play safe and play nice. And so part of one of the things that pushed them was they didn't really talk too much on the issues of
a decent human being.
Precisely, and that would be enough. Yeah. And so they didn't really play too much on the core issues that affects the average American. And for the Americans, the economy is a big thing. Number two, particularly immigration, is a big thing that Trump was playing around. Pamela was simply saying, oh, check it. And for the record, Trump's wife, Melania, is of Slovenian background, and that would sometimes played contradictions. And the poor woman, sometimes people wondered, what she thought, while the husband is actually unleashing some of these other things. But so that played slightly unfortunately against her. But like Sarah said, a woman, an African woman, and an Asian woman as such. So therefore, three very distinctive things. And finally, the fact that apparently, as it happened, I was not really following it very closely, she did not seek to push, to make herself enough. She was very much about trying to tie herself around Joe Biden by trying to pretend.
And that's also what an interesting thing that I wanted, I'm glad you're talking about, because there's also the thinking that if perhaps her policy diverted, and if she had a policy departure from Biden's,
could even just be emphasis, yes.
Let's say the war in Gaza, for example, she continued going with what Biden is standing for, and the thinking is perhaps if she had departed a little bit, maybe it could have actually tilted the scales a little bit.
It would almost certainly have made, because it would have made her herself rather than a protege of Joe Biden. And in any case, Joe Biden possibly pushed by Barack Obama in many ways. Obama is fantastically popular, and his wife, whatever the case. But when you come to an average American and they're beginning to push back somebody whom they had sort of let off go, it was basically a turn off to a particular constituency that they needed to persuade.
Thank you. Major, you're the happiest among the three. Your candidate,
he's now
candidate
boss
you were
king.
rooting for one.
I am happy.
Yes.
I kind of, in the middle of the campaign, knew that the Kamala would lose. When Obama was addressing one of the rallies that he was in, and they could boo Obama. And yet Obama is one of the iconic, very popular. That showed to me that, no, I think something is not right. And Obama responded, don't boo, vote. I said, hey, are you commanding them? So they booed him, and he responded, don't boo, vote. Is it an order? So I knew that things had gone wrong. But my colleagues have done a lot of surgery on the personalities and their demeanor and their images and the rest. I just want to say that the way it went, we should first of all note the importance of a US election to Uganda. And you had started by saying that. It's getting more important than before. Before, we used to say, America, when they sneeze, we get the flu, because they give money in terms of aid and they do this. But these days, Americans, and even Britain is following, and other powerful countries, they have started to make laws in their parliament that govern us. They have started to continuously make laws that have extraterritoriality. Ideally, laws are supposed to operate within the territory. But again and again now, they have gotten a way of governing the world by making laws of extraterritorial application. And not only of extraterritorial application to a country like Cuba, but even it is extraterritorial application to third parties about Cuba. What do I mean? For example, it would be okay to make laws that don't sell this to Cuba if the Americans, because it is their right between bilateral. Bilateral means between two countries. But now, they even make a law saying, if you're a German ship and you dock at the Cuban harbor, and the Cubans are supposed to pay you, and your money is supposed to be cleared, you know, the international money transfer system, through America, it will be blocked. A European citizen has power to fly to America and get visa on arrival. Say you are from Belgium. Now they make laws in their country saying, should a Belgian visit Cuba, you lose that right. So you now see how increasingly their parliaments are not only making laws that govern Cuba, but laws that govern Cuba's relationship with another country, assuming that was put on Uganda. They are making laws that govern Uganda, and even making laws that govern Uganda and India. This is very terrible. It is increasingly. So therefore, it concerns us who is in America. It concerns us who is in Parliament of America. Because they're going to make laws of extraterritoriality and even third-party extraterritoriality. It is very dangerous. And therefore, some of us felt that the Republicans are more inward-looking. And with their, of course, what Sarah has already said, America first. So they are not so much, they don't have the zeal of extraterritoriality like others. The zeal is less. Of course they do, but the zeal is less. And therefore their enforcement of things like same-sex, the gay rights, their zeal of enforcement is less than these others. Their zeal on enforcing their values are less than this one. So some of us are happy with the Republican, with Trump, because he is not going to be unnecessarily poking his nose into affairs of other people. Of course, Congress would say, hey, you want it because you feel now NRM will do that.
Dictators enjoy that, yes.
People really has to be poking his nose into affairs of others.
So that is what we want. But basically, these parties are the same. The core parties, Republican, Democrat, is just an American thing, it's American interest. But at least who is, I don't know which word to use, who is a better friend of the two? I don't want to use a derogatory term, but who is a better friend? The better friend is Republican, and that is Trump. Why? Because the American institutions of parliament, the American institutions of states, they're increasingly becoming extraterritoriality and third party.
Thank you. I'm being told it's time for us to take a break. Let's take a break and then we come back for about another 15 minutes and then we conclude.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Before we took a break, we were talking about what Donald Trump's win means for Africa and in particular Uganda. And Major had just submitted, talking about the US policies towards on LGBTQ. And the fact that now this means there's less pressure on countries that are anti-LGBTQ, countries like Uganda, and this gives countries some level of autonomy and some degree of sovereignty to actually run their affairs. I don't know what you think, Sarah. The fact that America there'll be less policing on other countries, is this something good for us as a country?
Well, first of all, the people who are celebrating Trump, especially those with sanctions, they could be celebrating too early. There are issues about America that don't change, regardless of who is in power. But also there will be a few policy shifts here and there, but it is not an overhaul of policy. So people need to be aware of that and maybe cut down or control their excitement. Yes, going by the Trump's first tenure in office, he really didn't do much globally on promoting accountability and human rights, the issues that create a bit of uncomfort with our colleagues in NRM. Have everything to do with accountability and human rights. And maybe just the new addition of AHA, but even in the absence of AHA, these issues that are a symptom of democratic decline existed. And their friends in Europe and America had expressed uncomfort in their bilateral relations. I don't know what Trump will do this time round. In his first term, it's also important to know that Trump had withdrawn from the Paris Agreement. And when he was campaigning, he had decided that climate change was a hoax in the first term.
Yeah.
Although this time round he seems to understand climate change, but his options as compared to renewable energy and smart climate options, his option on the campaign trail was fossil fuels, and I don't know whether that's better. it really doesn't sound good, and I hope he won't withdraw again from the Paris Climate Agreement, because climate change is real. Recent floods in Spain, the hurricanes in the US, the wildfires in Europe and the US. I think by now every global citizen should be aware of climate change and its dangers and why we need to restore nature in its form. That also, as part of our lessons as Africa, I think Africans need to have their own climate smart option. Instead of leaders running around looking for donations to restore nature that has been destroyed largely by bad governance. If you look at the depletion of wetlands in Uganda, it's bad governance. If you look at the depletion of forests, the forest cover has disappeared by about 64% under NRM regime. Bad governance, greed, plunder. So we need to really know that bad governance has repercussions. The disappearance of Mabira, whenever I pass Mabira forest, Mabira forest is transparent from the road. Something that never happened before. People have plundered it from the time of an attempt to give away Mabira. When that failed, I think the regime took the approach of saying, let's plunder and finish the forest and we see what you would do. The same approach that they have put on UCDA rationalization. So Mabira is no more as the most, the tropical rainforest of Africa. It is no more. So we don't need, to attend COP 1, 2, 3, I don't know, 24, 25 to know that we need to restore Mabira forest. We need to restore our wetlands. We need to restore water catchment areas to prevent unnecessary flooding, but also have smart cities that have proper drainage systems and plant more trees. These things don't need attending COP 100 for the leaders to take action.
Thank you, Sarah. Implications, of course, for a Trump win to Uganda.
It's actually a disaster. It's a disaster because a Trump may win with his perfect American exceptionalism, which is basically predominantly white American exceptionalism anyway, because there is such a thing called African American men exceptionalism, which refers to the fact that the most endangered species in terms of humans in America are black men. If you are to go by the policies of Trump, as I described much earlier, it is as bad to him there as it is here. But I'm saying that also as an African in Kampala who fundamentally believes in Pan-Africanism. And so therefore, I'm just as concerned about the African in America as I am to that in Haiti and that others in Jamaica. But back here, it is quite clearly the case that Trump will say, he used that word S-wall, shit-hole thing of Africa. He basically doesn't give a damn about this continent. And that's why the people who will be celebrating on this continent politically are dictators. People who will be allowed, they feel that they will have a free field to be able to do whatever they want to do because they will not get a major word from Washington. And so that makes it very, very unfortunate. But number two, really, Sarah couldn't have said it much better, this question of climate change. I still want to insist that Donald Trump is a climate change denier. He needs to prove to us over the next 100 days that he's improved, he's changed, and he needs to prove to us over the next 100 days, including his big words, including possibly his first visit to Europe, and the Europeans are being predominantly sick, to show that maybe he will not go back to break the climate agreement. The global climate consensus. I can continue. I left Nagongera in exile in 1987. And there are places I could not go by, at 7, 8 o'clock in the evening because it was that dark. Sarah, the whole of West Budama, except bordering Bositema, which is also now faced the same thing with like Mabira. There are no forests. So climate change is real, it's a threat. Then beyond the floods that you talk about the other day, 4 days ago, I was just down Northern Bypass. You know, the thing had closed the road in Chebando. A motorbike guy sunk in the flood in Chebando, the road down. The other Sunday, I was coming from a very good day. I'd even had a decent conversation with Jesus. Down in Zambia, Mukwano Road, you know, we couldn't cross. The road had just been done the other day. You can go on and on and on here within Kampala alone. So much as this, part of this is the NRA incompetence in terms of the infrastructure failures. But quite clearly, the climate change element of it is real. And my worry is that while we may be thinking Trump, we ourselves are also not sufficiently taking it very seriously. Otherwise, how would I go and leave the golf course as a decent as it used to be and come back and find a big hotel there in Golf Course and people to consider it as business as usual? But we could go on and on. So that is Trump for Africa. But that said again, America, whatever happens, as you said, Machala, it will always matter whoever is in the White House. And their policies, although the strategic principal position would be one in which maybe they don't mind so long as NRA is prepared to go and still fight for them their war in Somalia, they will continue. But generally, treating things on climate change, treating things on basically provisions for health, I mean the support that they normally give to us, particularly through USAID. And if you think of a President Trump who's as indifferent to Africa as he has been, and considering what happened recently, much more with GDF, if you go back and then he gets a briefing that these funny guys in Uganda are not even appreciating human, instead they're abusing us about homosexuality and things like that, he will not be kind. You say, forget about things like that. So no, we will suffer. Now, and who suffers the most? The poorest of the poor.
Yeah.
The extent of American support through various agencies, particularly to the social, to the civil society organizations, and directly to government, particularly in the areas of health and to an extent education, is extraordinary. It's underestimated, and that's why sometimes I find it strange that governments, in this case the Musevenis, can go up and then boast and try to seek to blackmail or to challenge these guys, you know, by saying some of the things that they normally say. It's extraordinary, though, finally, that Mr. Museveni's son, who commands Mr. Museveni's army, you know, goes ahead and does a treat on America. I hope he does not dare treat one of these days with the Trump president, although they're many friends. Because Trump will respond, and Elon Musk will report it to Trump, and Trump will respond. So as a matter of interest, that's the thing. But finally, we should look at global polity as Africans from an ideological perspective. Sarah and my support for the Democrats, we can call it Kamala Harris, is less about the points we've argued, but from my personal perspective, not from Sarah's, it's also ideological. That the Democratic Party is more of the average center-left political party. That I'm surprised these guys are not supporting, you know, because the center-left political parties would associate with Pan-Africanism in many cases. So there will be parties that support much more investment in public services, much more investment in social services, much more support, you know, for developing nations, much more progressive on immigration. I think your submissions on immigration, I can tell you that no, Trump, while he made that speech, and it was a surprising speech, the first is made ever, you know, that may seem to be progressive. I think he's realizing by, you know, that, look, he needs to be slightly much more presidential. But no, when they talk about immigration, you know, the time they start taunting the likes of Obama's and other slave children who don't know their great-great-grandparents and their land, whether it's in Ghana or somewhere in rural Uganda, no, it's important. It matters. And then I can just say that whatever happens, we just need to see that, well, they've done their little bit. We need to learn lessons as Uganda and make sure that we put our houses in order, have conversations that we had much later, agree to disagree, but make sure that we create systems here that work so that even if we end up with somebody who's possibly unpopular to other non-Ugandans, but that Ugandans have made the choice, that we respect it. And that in the very unlikely event that there is somebody who wins elections convincingly in Uganda, but is not necessarily my candidate, I should be able to have the mandate to respect them. The manner in which I was telling a South African broadcaster yesterday over Mozambique that while Frelimo wins, this is important, while Frelimo wins, you know, under their arguments, Frelimo has the responsibility to show the rest of the Mozambicans that, look, the elections by and large has been free and fair. If you have a basis of suspicion, people will suspect you, and as a country, it will not be moving far.
Thank you. Major, let me hear your thoughts, but I want us to focus on security. The cooperation, U.S. cooperation U.S. cooperation with Uganda, but on security. Because I don't think that is one of the areas that's actually going to change, whether it's Trump or anyone else in the White House. Because for geopolitical and geostrategic interests, naturally, if Uganda is helping to pacify the region, that is definitely a plus for the President Museveni, and also it works in terms of advancing U.S. interests within the region. I don't know what your thoughts are when it comes to this.
Well, my thoughts are clear there, but just a comment about what has been said. The Congress is wondering why we shouldn't support the Democratic, because they are quite progressive in the left.
Progressive left, yeah.
The Democratic are vulgar left. They are not really, they are not left in the progressive spirit. They are vulgar left, so you can't like them for that. And then the other thing you were saying that while environment works and needs nature works, but we also have the negligent by NRM. Of course, you know that Sarah knows there's what is called the defense of an act of nature. Even in law, an act of nature is a very accepted defense in law. Therefore, when
the law of thoughts.
Yes.
So how applicable is it?
Here is, you are saying that there is a flooding on roads in Kampala. That is an act of nature.
Really? When you have poor drainage system?
It is an act of nature. So you can't do much with an act of nature, and that is why even California can flood. In fact, America get flooded to the extent that they get experts from Netherlands, because the Dutch are the only expert people in maintaining water level flowing over. And that's why Netherlands is called Netherland. Netherland means a land below land. And they're expert to maintain what, ideally Netherland water should flood them, because the land is below sea level. Below, the water is up and the land is down. Many times America have called for experts from Netherland, because they are the ones who can serve them. Would you say there's poor drainage in America? An act of God can be an act of God. That is a victim. That is the problem we have. Now, about the security, is that true, we have a lot of alliance with the American in matters of security. Two key areas. One, in the Great Lakes region. For a long time, they have known that the stability capability or the stability of Great Lakes rests on Uganda. The congressman actually, on the other hand, would say we are destabilizing. No, yes, that is not what the world knows. The world knows us to be the center point for stability for South Sudan, for Congo, and any other part of the Great Lakes, including Burundi. So the Americans look upon us, in even Trump, for the stability of Great Lakes. Sarah worked in Great Lakes. She knows it more than anybody else. So that is one. Two, in the Horn of Africa, in Somalia, it is well known that we are the first army to set boots on the ground. The Americans had tried in there, I think, desert something, I don't remember.
Black Hawk.
A Black Hawk. And you could see what happened there. They killed Americans and dragged them on the street of Mogadishu. It was total humiliation, and they withdrew. And they were even wondering how what the congressman calls this NRM rebels or NRM guerrilla would do. But we went there and made a change. We were the first to put boots on the ground.
On their behalf.
So, you know, for Pan-African reasons, we wanted the stable Horn of Africa. So you can see that for those two reasons, for the Horn of Africa and for the Great Lakes region stability, we are really still called upon for that. So any American government worth its name would really want to address us for those key areas of stability. Now, I want to be brief, but let me comment about my earlier comment about the non-interference, you single out the same-sex position. Actually, I want to make it illustrated clearly this way. I have talked about their parliament. For example, American parliament can sit and table a bill in parliament called Kenya Management Bill. Can you imagine? Kenya Management Bill. Who are you to manage Kenya? So you pass a bill in America, you table a bill in American parliament called Kenya Management Bill. When it comes into an act, it is called Kenya Management Act. And they will implement it to stifle you. And that is why the same law I'm saying, they can even pass a law saying don't trade with the Kenya, don't do this with Kenya, sanction
But
Kenya, do
aren't you
this.
talking about the Global Magnitsky Act?
That one is a separate law. This one, it is specific because I know countries that they have done it. So if they do that to Kenya, they can even say, not only are we tying Kenya, but even India, if you do anything with Kenya, you are finished. Even you German, if you do anything, how? So that extraterritoriality has not yet come to the front, the consciousness of many people. But that is increasingly what their parliament is doing. Why do they do that? Because they know that when it is a law, an American law, even if you want to challenge, you say, but this is our law, it is not your law. It is our law. What do you have to do with our law anyway? You pass yours, me, we are passing ours. So you single the homosexual, but I am worried about the fact that they sit and table Kenya Management Bill, and it is passed into Kenya Management Act. The law you're talking, Sarah, governs countries within that range. But this one, they are now passing specific law for specific countries. And that is very dangerous. So what it means for us is the political is that implicating, but for the security, I've already said. Lastly, I want to say, I wanted to say this in the rights debate, that if we say rights are inborn, then the Martin Luther King who died fighting for it did nothing. After all, they should have sat and waited, and the rights is there.
Is that your conclusion?
No, yes.
Would you just conclude and then we
Okay.
close the conversation?
My conclusion is that today we have had a debate on the Parliament of Uganda to a big extent, and the American. Please, whatever is happening in Parliament calls upon Ugandans to check the quality of legislature, including sanity of mind. Sometimes you are going to end up electing mad people, and because we don't have procedures of checking sanity before nomination, we shall end up like that. So please, whatever happens in Parliament, let us do due diligence in selecting our members, because some become speakers. Anyway, we are not talking of ordinary members. For the American, we wish them well. It is their democracy. They have elected the crude, vulgar, truth-saying Trump. Now tomorrow, when we elect our Museveni with all the allegations, that is democracy.
Joseph, your parting shots, and we call it a day.
Oh gosh, do you know what? I'll just conclude this, that since Comrade Rich brought back this thing to do with rights, as a matter of interest, we must learn from what has happened in America, and we must learn from what happened in Parliament on Wednesday, and we must resolve that never again should we be messing with our basic rights, and that rights are inherent inborn, and then as far as the Republic of Uganda, the fight for these spaces, was done by our great-grandparents. My grandfather's leg was broken, and we went and achieved independence. People fought Idi Amin, and we've moved fast forward to where we are today. UPC led the campaigns for restoration of multipartyism. It started way back, in 1986, demanding for it, intensified in 1989, and in 2004, courts agreed with us. So from 2004 to 2005, the right to freedom of speech and association, including, the right to belong to political organizations, parties and organizations of your choice, and to make political conversations of this nature in this country, became lawful. So it's not a preserve of anybody or any state. And so citizens, young citizens, should continue to engage freely, openly, but they should not be abusive. They should not be used box fixing, but at the same time, they should not be blackmailed by anybody that discussing Museveni, discussing bad roads, discussing theft, discussing Roko, discussing disappearances is anything illegal. It must be done. And discussing Mabira, and discussing our future, and discussing America, and discussing Kenya, and discussing the war in Sudan, and discussing whatever happens in Somalia. That's really all I can say. That's what democracy is all about. And may the lessons from America link it again with the miserable thing that happened in the National Assembly, and for young people to know that it's better. Except that one of the missing things we know, the distance that Comrade Awich is talking about, maybe schools should be watching, that schools debates and decorum, post schools, that political parties, youth elements, youth wings of political parties, the units that brought people like us to these kind of positions, means therefore that when young leaders emerge and the young people cannot become members of parliament, start by becoming young councillors for Uganda People's Congress and other political parties, so that by the time you become competent enough to be able to go to the National Assembly, you know what it is to be a member of parliament, you know what it is to be a leader, and you're ready to be able to take us
Thanks
forward.
a lot. Thank you. Let's hear from you, Sarah.
Well, I will conclude maybe with our affairs, because for America, you know, to some extent, it doesn't matter who becomes president, because institutions and systems work. If the president gets out of hand or out of, you know, what is expected, the institutions will check the excesses of this individual. So it's not something to worry about so much, and that's why even the attempt of insurrection on January 6th, when Trump had failed to peacefully hand over power, failed. So they are lucky that they have built a culture for democracy. They have established institutions and systems, and we should aspire to do the same in our countries. Coming to, you know, the Parliament and the coffee bill, and I want to pick from Joseph's point on the need for mentorship of leaders, cadre placement, cadre training. Cadre should be serious business of parties. Parties are breeding grounds for leadership. They are mentorship hubs. So if, and I found out which for NRM, which some of us, when we were young, we had assumed that it would, you know, take up like the steps of CCM and the ANC in cadre mentorship, training, and placement. When you produce leaders like we see these days, it is so disappointing that the ruling party cannot provide examples to the young people. And I think you need to have an internal reflection of the caliber of leaders you put at the national scale, and that goes for all other parties. And we need to seriously call the parties out to really give this country deserving leaders.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate each one of you for your contribution to this conversation today. Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah Bireete, Mr. Joseph Othieno, and retired Major Awich Pollar, for your time. This is Citizens Chat Show. My name is Judith Atim. We'll be back next week, same time. See you then.